Hello, so today what we are going to be doing is simply think of this as just your general way for how to complete the Pensum A, B, and C for every single chapter. Despite the fact that there will be different content each time, obviously, the way in which you go about solving each one of the exercises is more or less the same. So let's start with Pensum A, then we're going to do Pensum C second, actually, and then Pensum B. This isn't necessarily the order in which you need to do them. However, I think that it is I find it to be the most helpful, personally. So Pensum A is the grammar exercise, and because of the fact that in Lingua Latina, grammar is primarily done by means of explaining endings or types of endings and stuff like that, or even sometimes types of words, the vast majority of the time, what you're going to be doing in every single Pensum A is filling in the blank spaces that are at the end of the word. So usually you see the word fluvius or fluvii, but you'll notice that they stop at the I in both for both times. Now there are also longer spaces here, and I'll explain those in just a second. They're very, very similar to the long spaces in Pensum B. So you might be thinking, well, this is all well and good for chapter 1, where we only have one set of endings that we need to worry about, but what about chapter, say, 7, where there's going to be a ton of different endings that we need to worry about? Well, it's fairly simple. So you see in each chapter you have this Grammatica Latina, which goes through what are the relevant grammar bits for this chapter. So in chapter 1, we're being primarily introduced to the concept of singular and plural, namely 3 different types of singular and plural. The singular and plural of words like fluvius, that end in us, the singular and plural of words like insula, which end in a, and then the singular and plural of words like oppidum, which end in So you have 3 different types of singular and plural, namely us, I, I, and then I, a. Right. And you'll notice that the adjectives, as we discussed in class, go along with the noun. Okay, so how do you go through this? Well, so let's do. I'm gonna try and do like the first 2 sentences here, then say the first 3, maybe 2 or 3 sentences here, and then probably the first 2 sentences here. So let's start with this. So nilus fluvi something est. Nilus renus fluvi something something. Okay, well, how do we solve this? Well, so what it's basically asking is what ending goes here. Now, there are a couple ways you can figure that out. You can go back into the book, or you can simply look on the previous page. So what ending goes at the end of fluvi? It's fluvius, since we're only talking about one. So since there's only one fluvius here, namely nilus, we would write nilus fluvius est. Now, in the second one, because of the fact that there are 2 things that we're talking about here, we wouldn't say fluvius, we would say fluvii. Why? Because of the fact that the plural is fluvii. And similarly, we need to switch between est for singular and then sunt for plural. Okay, so that part is fairly simple. But now in the second paragraph, we add adjectives. Now remember, the adjective needs to match the noun that it is going along with. So it becomes renus fluvi something mag something est. It becomes renus fluvius magnus est. Why? Because we're only talking about one river. So it has to be us rather than fluvii magni. So let's skip down a little bit. Let's go to Sardinia, insul something mag something est. Then Sardinia et Sicilia non insul something parv something, sed insul something mag something sunt. All right. So Sardinia, what would we put here? Well, again, there's only one island here in this case. So that means that we need to use the singular form. Well, what's the singular form? Well, it says that the singular form seems to be insula magna. Okay. Well, that makes things simple. So Sardinia insula magna est. And then let's go to Sardinia et Sicilia. Now we have two things. Non insul something parv something, sed insul something mag something sunt. Okay, well, let's figure out what endings here. Well, I think it's probably going to be just the plural. And since the plural is I, he would say, Sardinia et Sicilia non insulae parvae, sed insulae magnae sunt. Fair enough. And then let's do this. So, A et B, liter something Latin something sunt. Okay, well, for these ones, all we need to really do is figure out whether or not liter something or vocabul something, whether or not these are meant to be like oppidum, whether or not they're meant to be like insula, or whether or not they're meant to be like fluvius. And we do that by looking back at our vocabulary or looking forward at our vocabulary right here and seeing which one they match to. So we can see the word litera ends in an a, which means that it's probably meant to be like insula. Okay, well, let's try that out. A et B. Okay, well, what goes here? Well, there are two letters here, so that means that we would need to do A et B literae Latinae sunt. Okay, so when you go down, you'll look, okay, vocabulum ends in a um, which means it's probably meant to go along with the same endings that oppidum would have. Okay, so I'd like to keep this video as short as possible, preferably under 10 minutes. So now we're going to go to Pensum C. So the way you do Pensum C is first you need to figure out what the question is asking. So let's take three examples. Esne Sparta in Italia, let's see, ubi est Brundisium, and quid est Tiberis. Let's take those three questions. So let's start with Esne Sparta in Italia. Now if you remember, the ne at the end of a word just simply should be just treated as a question mark, basically, just indicating that the sentence is a question. So Esne Sparta in Italia means, is Sparta in Italy? Okay, well, we can go back to the beginning of the book and looking at, well, this is only half the map on the computer program, but we can see, oh, look, there's Sparta. Is that Italia? Doesn't look like it. It says Graecia instead. Okay, so that means that Sparta isn't in Italy. Instead, it's in Greece. Well, how do we write that? Well, if the question is in Latin, then what you really need is to answer the question in Latin. So, Esne Sparta in Italia. You would reply saying, Sparta non est, so is not in Italia, sed in Graecia. Hopefully that makes sense. Next, we have ubi est Brundisium. Well, ubi means where. So ubi est Brundisium? Well, if you go back to the map again, you'll see that Brundisium is a city in Italy. So you would say, Brundisium est in Italia. Make sure you keep that little macron over Italia when it's following in. All right, so that's fairly simple. The ubi questions are fairly simple. You simply say the place that they're in. But let's go to the next one. Quid est Tiberis? Okay, well, what does quid mean? Well, simply it means what. So it's asking you, what is this? Not where is it, not is it in, or is it this other place, but just simply what is it? And you would answer that by going to your map and seeing whether or not it's an insula, whether or not it's a fluvius, or an oppidum. In this case, Tiberis is a fluvius. Now the question is it a fluvius magnus, a big river, or a fluvius parvus, a small river? And if you go back into the text or just simply look on the map, you'll see that it's actually a very small river. So you would reply by saying, Tiberis est fluvius parvus. So it doesn't look like I'm going to be able to keep this video under 10 minutes, so I might as well stretch this part out a little bit more. So with all of these, you want to keep a sense of consistency about your answers. Make sure that you answer in a complete sentence. Notice how I said, Esne Sparta in Italia, Sparta non in Italia est, said in Graecia. Notice how I didn't say no, or in the Latin, non. And similarly, if you come across something where you're supposed to say yes, you don't simply write yes. Furthermore, notice how I answered in Latin. I already sort of mentioned this, but please make sure you answer in Latin, or else the question, or else the answer will be considered wrong.